Hello everyone and welcome to this session, AI Friend or Foe. And it's my total pleasure to be chairing this conversation, which is about a subject that seems to be evolving at lightning speed. And unless you've been living under a rock for the last few months, then you'll almost certainly have heard an awful lot about it. I'm Kwek, and joining me is a fantastic panel of experts and industry leaders. We have, and we're going to dissect how AI, the world of AI, and how it has an impact on our television industry, or could have a big impact. Joining me is, unfortunately, not Verity Harding, who was going to be here today, but there was a train issue, shall we say, so she's unfortunately not been able to make it. So instead, we have the brilliant Kamal Ahmed, who was the former editorial director for BBC News, and is now the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the News Movement, a new digital news media company. We have Tom Graham, who is the co-founder of Metaphysic, a London-based startup working at the frontier of AI in entertainment, and Tom is seen as a leader in the field of generative AI. Grace Boswood, who is the technology director at Channel 4, and prior to that, Grace was the Chief Operating Officer of the BBC's Design and Engineering department, where she led the delivery of strategic projects with the technology and digital teams. And Herman Narula is co-founder and CEO of Improbable, a British multinational technology company founded in 2012. And Improbable makes distributed simulation software, enabling virtual worlds for video games and metaverse environments. Thank you all so much for joining me here today. So, Kamal, if you'd like to just kick things off, would you be able to tell me a little bit about what this new wave of artificial intelligence, generative AI, what are some of the opportunities and potentials from your perspective here? Why should people be excited about this?
So I think, as Carolyn said this morning, I think it's really important that we understand our terminology. I think, as she said, machine learning and AI techniques have been with us for an awful long time. This next generation is about generative AI and large language models, which is basically predicting from the past what might be going to happen in the future in some manner. So we're talking here really about generative AI, which has caused all the discussion around ChatGPT-3, Bard, ChatGPT-4, et cetera, et cetera. That's why the conversation has really been sparked. And I think as leaders of organizations, or if you're within organizations that are about creative energy and creating great content, you have to think strategically, first off, about your purpose. What are you here to do before you even discuss what is generative AI? And the purpose, for example, for the news movement is to create engaging, fact-based, useful information for the next generation of consumers. And that's our purpose. So therefore, then you start thinking about what generative AI can do to help you. And there are fantastic advantages to generative AI for us as a business, creative business, and there are some risks. And I think the advantages are what you might describe as the commodity end of your business, the bits and pieces you have to do all day, every day to produce content. So for example, for us, we're a social media and digital platform business. One example where we are already testing how generative AI can help us. When you upload video onto Video Elephant or Yahoo, which is obviously a way of creating content for your audience, but also creating revenue for your business, you need to create captions from that content. And you need to create metadata from that content. And that is a headcount, a relatively laborious job of typing out a 100-word caption to fit the caption space within Yahoo or Video Elephant, for example, in this case that we are just testing at this stage, and then the metadata and the tagging. Now, AI can help do that laborious, commoditized journey for you as a business. So that's a practical thing that AI can help you do. And also it helps, for example, we're looking at how it can help with accessibility. So we write in English. How can we create other languages and other language content from what we do? And obviously language models do that very, very cleverly, because they can actually create language that doesn't sound like it's a translation from English in this instance, but actually is in the vernacular, more close to the vernacular of how native speakers of those languages speak. So when you're doing an explainer on the coup in Gabon, as we have done to some success for our audiences, that could be translated into the different dialectical approaches for many of the countries in Africa, in West Africa, that are affected. So there's an accessibility issue. Then just, Nick, finally, then there's the risks. So there's the advantages and there's the risks. Generative AI is a rear-view mirror product. It uses the billions of pieces of data that exist in the world to predict what may be a good option or a good answer to what you are attempting to do. And as any rear-view mirror that is based on data that is based on human behavior, it has problems that we all have as human beings. Racism, ableism, sexism, misinformation, hallucination, as it's called. And being human-made is a really, really high value for us. I was at Google Zeitgeist earlier this year, which is their big thinking at the Grove Hotel just north of London. And there they said, the more of your business in the creative industry that you do by AI, the more it can be copied by another business. Your human talent, the more of your business that is human talent, supported by AI, the more defendable it is as a model, because AI can't send one of our reporters, Lucy Marley, to Syria to find out the latest about the ISIS camps. And I remember I was speaking at the World Association of News Publishers in Taiwan earlier this year, and one of the executives from AFP said, AI can't put up a camera in a hurricane. So the things that you can do as human beings are incredibly valuable. So that's how we've approached it.
Thanks so much, Kamal. And we'll get to more of the cause for concern in a bit. But Grace, what's your view of this new wave of AI in particular? How does it sit with you at Channel 4? Are you upbeat about its potential?
I'm going to say what Kamal said a bit more quickly. It can save us money or it can make us some money, right? That's what we need here to do. And we are looking at both ends of that scale, right? So we need to work out exactly where are the parts of our workflow that are non-differentiating, or as importantly, constraining our creative opportunities. So the volume of content that we can put out on 9 p.m. on Channel 4 or on internet channels is constrained by how quickly someone can watch it and comply it. Computer vision can solve that problem. Suddenly you can get through that workflow more quickly, and that will create a differentiation for our business and stop a constraint. It's quite simple in the first instance. I think in the medium and longer term, I am really optimistic there is a generative AI format out there. I don't know what it is. There are cleverer minds in this room out here thinking about that. But if you think about, and Carl Warner, who's a colleague of mine, this is his story, not mine, so I will credit him. He talked about how the rig changed output kind of, because we could suddenly get into hospitals, we get into schools, we had access in a way that rig cameras gave us that really had a creative flourish, and loads of new programs came out of it. What is the equivalent in the production workflow that AI can unlock? Is it casting? Is it editing? Is it massive data processing around health or fitness or all those kind of wearables we have on ourselves? That is the really creative opportunity here, and I'm massively optimistic about that.
Cool. Herman, so you've been working in AI and developing AI for several years now. What is this new wave of generative AI? What does that mean for you? And do you think it offers more opportunities now for the people in this room and for the media world?
We're all engaging in the same bias that happens every single time that something that we can sense is actually real and probably quite frightening occurs. We're trying to put it into a safe box. Every conversation we've had now, can it make us more money? Can it take money away? Human-made, and I can see your point of view, can continue to be valuable. But maybe an example might be illustrative as to why I have perhaps a slightly different view. When I came here to study, I wasn't very good at maths. And I had a very long and detailed conversation. This is quite important. You have to get quite richly into your interactions with some of these products to really understand their capability. And I confessed this to an AI, and I said, I'm not that into maths. I'm a computer scientist, but there are certain aspects of maths I don't love. And it said, have you thought about linear algebra? Does that sound interesting to anybody here, linear algebra? I was like, look, well, perhaps Steve, but I said, look, that's maybe the most boring thing I had to study. It's like, no, it's not boring. Let me tell you why it's not. Imagine a room full of fireflies all around you. Okay? Imagine that they're all moving in different directions. Okay? Now imagine trying to get a piece of paper that you could fold, that could capture their motion. And then it showed me an equation, and it said, think of this equation as a way of capturing the essence of the movement of those fireflies and yet simplifying it. And then it told me all the things that I use every day, from image compression to other types of algorithm that are based on this principle. I've been to Cambridge. I've studied at the best prep schools. I've had tutors coming out of my ears for 20 years. I've never had anything explained to me like that, not in such a personal way. So I thought maybe this is a fluke. Maybe this sort of information, somebody wrote a paper about it once. So I called up my friend. He's a classicist from Oxford, a lawyer now as well. And he said, how about this? I'm the only person, and I know I'm the only person, that's written a dissertation specifically on youthful deaths in Virgil and a particular conclusion around it. So it cannot be part of the training data. I'm going to set you 3 hours to do, with Latin textual analysis, and I don't know any Latin, this specific dissertation question. In 3 hours, I had done everything from looking at Augustus's eulogy for his dead nephew to the use of specific verbs by Virgil, and came to the same conclusions he came to in a year. To look at this as anything other than a disruption on the order of magnitude of the steam engine, a cognitive engine, is really doing a disservice to your own ability to adapt to this. I'll just close by saying the most dangerous and interesting thing about this technology is that it can write code. In our company today, we've already begun replacing aspects of how we develop software with the automatic writing of software through software that we can then configure, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. So it is a tool that can create other tools, and it is a tool that can learn to use other tools. That creates like an exponential set of changes, disruptions, and opportunities that I don't think we're in a position to really reason about yet. So for me personally, yes, of course, it's changed business. It's allowed me to make more money, reduce my costs. Lawyers, we've signed our first contract written by an AI. But I'm looking at it on a different level. I'm beginning to think, well, what does this really mean for me as a human being? Even a human being who might have thought of himself as a clever human being. How do I have to think completely differently in this new reality, this new world that this represents? That's a hard thing to do. It's a scary thing to do. And I think we do everyone a disservice if we're not honest with them that this isn't going to be like last time. This isn't going to be just more of the same. This is going to be something else entirely. And it's going to be weird, and it's going to be strange.
But these thoughts aren't inconsistent, are they? Because we can take the right next step as business people, and we can learn, and we can listen to people that speak so compellingly about the opportunities.
I got this from ChatGPT.
I loved it. Loved it. But we have to do both parallel tracks, don't we? We have to deal with the near term and lean into the future.
We do, but let me pose a question to you. When you make decisions about your organization, what time horizon do you think about? Do you plan a year, 6 months, 5 years?
Good question. My boss is in the room.
5 years. That's what she said, 5 years.
But certainly not on I think that personally, I think this is one of these things that change will happen very slowly and then very quickly. So I think that the disruption will be there, but we have to react in the near term in our annual budget processes. So why now? But also think in the future where the disruption is and look for the creative opportunity. And as Kamal said, look for where the remit is.
The problem is now you can't do that because the rate of change is so great that I find it hard as a technologist to really make any predictions about what my company will do next year. That's the problem. It changes the decision frame.
Thanks so much, everyone, for such comprehensive answers there. I was just looking for a few words about some of the plus points and opportunities, but we've got into so much detail there. Tom, I'm not going to ask you about any of the opportunities, but what I would like to know, Tom, is if you could maybe tell us a little bit more about what Metaphysic can do and maybe show us and tell us.
So at Metaphysic, we specialize in using generative AI to create content, this is visual content, audio content, that looks and feels exactly like the real world. And some people might be familiar with Deep Tom Cruise on TikTok, where an AI version of Tom Cruise looks so realistic that hundreds of millions of people think it's really Tom Cruise. There is a level of being able to use algorithms trained on real world data to create content that is so realistic that in the mind's eye, it becomes integrated with reality. And following on with some of the things that Herman says, I agree entirely. We think about what is the future of human reality? Because if you can take data from the real world and manipulate it with algorithms to recreate experiences and events and feed them back to real people, and this content features real people, it features their house, their children, their environments, you can feed back experiences to them. But you can change the data, you can manipulate them. Who has control over the reality that humans are going to be faced with from now until the rest of the history of humankind. That is a really, really fundamental question. And I think I like the, happening slowly and then all at once. I think it's been happening slowly since the Industrial Revolution, and it has happened all at once pretty much right now. It took us 100 years to move society to adapt to the changes profound through the Industrial Revolution. I think that we're going to see the same order of magnitude of change happen in 10 to 15 years. And so today we can create photorealistic versions of people where no one can tell the difference and play them live real time in front of people. And that's really profoundly interesting. And at scale, 10 years from now, I believe that probably 90% or more of everything that every single person on Earth looks at on their screen is going to be some format of AI-generated pixels. Whether that's coming to you through VR or a screen or you're listening to it, it is going to be based on real-world data, so the real-world data becomes very, very important. Whoever owns that, whoever controls that, that's the core question. But then people who serve up content are going to have massive control over what we believe in, what we value, human knowledge, because our experience of reality is going to be largely augmented by AI-generated content that we consume every day.
So Tom, how good is this content, content that you're generating?
Yeah, so we can have a little look at a live demo. Hopefully it works. So if I get up here and move over to the lectern, I think we're going to reorient the camera. So can I see myself? Can anyone see me? So we're going to turn on basically the live version of our AI-generated models. For instance, we've been using this on production on Tom Hanks and Bob Zemeckis' new film with Robin Wright, and Tom Hanks is acting away, but he's looking at on the screen next to the stage, and Bob Zemeckis, the director, is looking at a live feed of the AI-generated version of 20-year-old Tom Hanks perfectly doing that kind of acting. And so when we turn it on, we might get some people up here to try, but let me see. Yeah, so it's actually been on the whole time that I've been speaking. So everything that you're looking at now is AI-generated pixels as a layer on top of my face. It's a model of me, but you can see, my hand kind of disappears behind the model. It's a really, it's not even a very, very big or sophisticated model, to be honest. Doesn't take a lot of training.
Easy peasy.
Yeah, but it's matched to my face. So the model understands my face, and it understands the destination, also my face, and so it can make a really, really good match. It's really intelligent at trying to put the face on top. So maybe now, if we try something interesting, if I invite Alex up on stage, if you would be a sport and indulge us for a second.
Here, there.
Yes, if you come over here. Okay, so if I stand next to you, so that's
That's my new face.
I'm loving this for me, to be honest.
I mean, I don't want to be rude, but I think I've looked better.
I'm getting married in 2 weeks, and I used to have hair just like Alex's.
Could you have thought about shaving before?
No, but I had to get a haircut for the wedding, so now we could have been total twinsies, but so that's an example of, it's exactly the same model, but it is adapting.
Really, really bad look.
It's adapting to Alex's face and trying to create the best version of a person that it can in the context of being me. But is it uncomfortable? Is it weird?
I think it's the facial hair.
Would you
maybe a future look for me. It's really.
Maybe it's a future look for me.
It's really odd. It's really disconcerting. What happens if I put my hand over my face? It's really disconcerting.
Yeah, and I think the model is still running on, oh no, we've turned it off on me. But you can absolutely run, multiple models at the same time. So there you go.
Well done, well done.
Wearing the face of Tom Graham. So obviously that was it's pretty amazing stunt. And you've been on America's Got Talent, haven't you, as a contestant? And obviously the deepfake videos of Tom Cruise on TikTok are really, really realistic. But for program makers in this room, for people that are making Strictly Come Dancing, what has this got to do with them?
Yeah, so just a caveat, I didn't ever expect to be on America's Got Talent. That's just weird. I was a lawyer and a technologist, and We had Simon Cowell singing and brought Elvis back to life and stuff like that. For people creating content today, everything about the content creation process is going to change quite rapidly over the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. In the context of VFX, VFX is too expensive to put creatures into TV shows, but it won't be in a couple of years. So that experience that you get of explosions and aliens running around in movies that cost hundreds of millions of dollars will come to television. Slowly, these tools will become more available to regular people, that regular people will be able to create Hollywood quality, feature grade content in their basement. And it will feature their favorite characters from their cinematic universes that they love, and they can put themselves into content. So the things to look out for are, how can you use AI to create content more effectively? Because if you don't, someone will, and quickly. And then how can you engage audiences in new ways by bringing audiences into content? Because you can take an audience member and put them in a show, and you can stream that back to just them, right? Imagine you're in Disney Plus, you click on Star Wars, and you select your face and you want to play Anakin Skywalker or Princess Leia. And Disney could stream that back to you with you in the movie. Integrating audiences and their reality to make more content that is more relevant to them is probably the future of engaging audiences.
Herman, and where do you see the potential of this sort of technology, generative AI, to broadcasters in this room? I mean, if you're televising a live major event, how can AI possibly help?
All right, so I'm on a bit of a high today from last night, which sounds really bad, and I don't mean drugs. We actually broadcast our first baseball game ever. Major League Baseball put a group of about 1,500 fans from all over the world simultaneously into a virtual ballpark and recording the telemetry and movements of all of the players at the Angels versus Rays game. They were able to bring that into the virtual stadium. And
so, how many people did you put into this
So
virtual
the most people you can normally put into a concurrent virtual world is less than the people in this room. It's about 100 people. The reason for that is that you need to send messages for every person, and it becomes a multiplication. So 100 people is thousands of messages. We handle 20 billion messages a second because we're able to use AI to predictively determine where those messages go. So we can support up to 20,000, actually 30,000 people, but 1,500 were there last night. And they were all singing and talking and meeting each other and engaging in the most riotous and hilarious fun together in that context. But the characters looked, at the time we were just using a kind of standard avatar system. We've now developed an AI-based solution, which we call Carnival, which we've not publicly announced before, that lets you take content like that developed by Tom's company and actually render it concurrently with lots of other different generated AI, which is a very hard computational problem. What I see happening is interactive experiences, not consumptive experiences, which are the dominant form of how most young people engage with things, are going to swallow everything. They're going to swallow sports, they're going to swallow news, they're going to swallow the way that we engage with and enjoy our favorite IPs. And populating interactive experiences is extremely expensive in terms of content. Most big budget video games cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So if you can take the cost of content down, then suddenly you can make interactive experiences, which all the data shows us are far more engaging, much more available to people. And combine that with technology like ours, you could have stadiums full of thousands of people looking like themselves, or perhaps looking like each other, engaging in environments that are just totally novel. That's the future.
And you're talking about if you're watching a major sporting event like the World Cup or whatever, that people would watch that in a virtual environment that you facilitated.
Yeah, it's kind of magical because I'm not a baseball fan, but I became one. Hearing the crowds chanting, everyone hearing around you, hearing the announcers, being able to interact with the world. Once you create enough opportunity for new experiences that are interactive, you really change your relationship with the medium. That's really key. And this is part of an area of psychology called self-determination theory. It's a pretty profound area of psychology that says that this is really essential to roping people in. I'd also say if you're 9 to 15 right now, you don't really watch 4-hour-long sports matches. You don't have the attention span for that. You'd like to interact with things. So I think broadcasters and content creators need to use AI, of course, but they also need to be thinking in terms of interactive experiences.
But generative AI has really kind of changed things for you in that you've been working with AI for years, over a decade. and now you're able to do things that you
Just at a speed and at a cost point that we never could before.
And can I just ask, people in this room, has anyone here used ChatGPT or Google's Bard? Would you mind raising your hand if you have? How many of you use it regularly, maybe 2 or 3 times a week? Right, so Grace, when you are you're thinking about Gen AI and kind of, are you sitting here going, oh goody, you know, what does this mean for you at Channel 4? And specifically, do you see this as a transformative piece of technology to the workforce at Channel 4?
Yeah, so the story you just told there is slightly terrifying in the context of too much to watch now, because suddenly I've got not all just the streamers creating content, I've got everyone in their basement. So there's going to be a massive job here for companies like ours and Kamal to steer and curate and make that quality and that joy come through, because otherwise it's going to be very, very overwhelming. So I think our business has become more important, not less important in that context, so lots of opportunity there.
But from a production perspective?
From a production point, yeah, there's definitely workforce improvement. So we will, you know, once Microsoft lower the price, or I go and hang out with Juliet at Google, we'll put these tools into our enterprise workflows. Of course we will, because that is the job that isn't adding value to people's days as in colleagues or value to our bottom line as a business. And so we need to work out the ways to do that safely and carefully and not, I'm waiting to see the first real Gen AI mess up from a big company. Somebody said yesterday that everyone in AT&T, the 40,000 of them all got to use AI by the end of the year. I love that ambition, but there's a lot of risk in there, right? So we have to be a bit careful. But over time, yeah, we're going to see these in and we're going to train and we're going to learn. And all I'd ask us as this room, for people who are a little bit more legacy than your really fun companies, is we just need to learn and listen and stay in touch with this, because otherwise we will get taken over. And we need to be really transparent and communicative with our colleagues and with our staff, who are all happy, worried, optimistic, pessimistic about this whole debate that's happening out in public, and they need our guidance and our communication about what is safe, what is not, what is expected, and where can you run free and have those real creative moments that are going to transform and create the new format and the new production and the new thing that isn't just saving us money, but is really going to cut through and be really brilliant. And that might be sports, it might be other such things.
Sorry, I just want to say, sorry, I just want to say there, I mean, we've heard a lot about all the different opportunities and how it can speed things up in terms of production and how it can perhaps make people more creative and things like that. But I think there would be remiss not to mention that we could be potentially talking about people losing their jobs here. And I want to know, you know, from you, what do you think about that? If you are using perhaps a new Photoshop tool to quickly and rapidly create a new graphic design or something like that in mere seconds, whereas it would traditionally take someone maybe a few days or whatever, what are those people going to do then?
Because 2 answers to that question. One is they'll do new jobs, right? So, you know, we've got to have a whole lot of prompt engineers. We've got a whole lot of people that need creative skills in order to make this technology work. So lots of retraining, reskilling. But also in the near term, I think we're just going to be creating more of those assets and more of those things. So you combine the skills of graphic designer and curation with personalization and social media, there's a massive explosion of value here that we need more people, not less people, in order to do, and the technology is going to enable us. So I'm not pretending that all the skills that we need now will be needed in 5, 10, 15 years, but it was ever thus, right? And so therefore we're just going to need to stay close to that and protect our new talent so that they're learning the skills of the future and not the skills of the past.
Talking about new talent and talent of tomorrow, there is a concern from my perspective, which is about, you know, how do you ensure that the talent of tomorrow actually gets their foot in the door at institutions who may be given more menial tasks or
can we not? Sorry, I'm just going to get a little. Let's come in a bit here.
Go on.
I mean, so Tom, what in the world that you're imagining, which does have these amazing opportunities and fantastic moments, if we are in the human-made world as well, how are you thinking about the risks around what it is you're creating, around the actual world of real actors and the actual world of real writers and the actual world of real artists that can just be then, as you say, manipulated, ripped off, some might describe. But there is a very big discussion for us to have as a creative industry of whatever type around how we are going to create the opportunities that you've so excitingly described, but also have consideration. So we, for example, have used a number of times AI-generated art to create different types of imagery. A number of artists have already raised the issue that that is simply ripping off their work to create stage 3 work of some description. So how are you thinking about that notion of the manipulated world only living off the work of people who are then not remunerated or included in the whatever comes back monetarily or creatively from the work you're doing?
Yeah.
So when you can create a version of reality that looks real, could supplement performance on stage, or you can create someone's performance, if you can do that technology, there comes a great responsibility with that. We don't open source the tool sets to allow anybody to create photorealistic AI-generated content. There are open source versions of that people use for deepfake pornography, for political misinformation, to create deepfakes designed to manipulate and harm people. That is not what we focus on by any measure. And at the heart of enabling and empowering people, including actors, performers, and then regular people after that as this technology and content scales to all of us, is to allow people to own and control their data that is used to train these algorithms and provide them with pathways and remedies to maybe control how their likeness, their voice, etc., may be used. And in the case of actors, it may be their performance which is being used. In Hollywood, there are generally contracts going backwards and forwards, so it is a little bit, there's quite a lot of clarity on some level. In the real world, as we scale this, I think it's more systemically, societally damaging, potentially, if all of us give up our data to large technology companies and give it to them to own, to do what they want with us, probably create content and market it back to us. We should all own and control our data, and that should be the fundamental concern because it is the base layer of creating any kind of content. Today, you don't really have any rights to how you look or how you sound. If someone creates a sway generous version of you or an AI version of your voice and doesn't use any of your copyrighted material, because you may not own the copyright in that recording of your voice that they use to create the model, you as a person don't have any rights to stop them. You can't issue takedowns, there's no IP infringement. That's really weird when you think about it. The Drake and The Weeknd song, which was an AI version of Drake's voice, there was no legal basis for that takedown on behalf of Drake, The Weeknd, or Universal Music. It was ultimately taken down, but there's just no IP infringement because they didn't copy anything that Drake did. They just used a version of, an approximation of his voice that happened to be incredibly realistic.
I think, Tom, that's a really interesting and very helpful answer. I think there will be very tiered approaches. It's difficult to imagine, I think, Herman, you're absolutely right, let's not predict the future because it's going to be changing so fast, but it is difficult to imagine how individuals who are not in the Hollywood system or in the journalistic system, who have not been at that kind of level of understanding of contracts and how that all works, it's difficult to see how. We have been through this movie before with people just giving up their data to allow social media to exist. And we've seen some of the huge negatives that have come from people not understanding what you're even asking them to give up before things happen. So to put the responsibility on individuals, I think is going to be a difficult conversation.
No, this is fundamental. So in Web 2.0, we don't give our data to Facebook, Google, Apple. They create the data, they own it. They own the copyright in that data. But our face is our voice, the data used to create an AI version of us, if we give it to those companies for free and we don't fundamentally own it, then we have no rights in the world of property ownership. There are lots of remedies and rights, and property ownership is obviously a Western liberal standard that is fundamental. But we don't have that in Web 2.0. We need to have that if we are going to outsource our perspective of reality and who we are.
I think that, Tom, there is a lot of onus you're placing on the public there to come forward and start owning their government and registering their faces and things like that. And I think that at the moment what we're seeing is that the barrier to entry into creating deep fakes, and this has got deep fakes written all over it really, is so low that there could be many bad actors around the world that are not just empowering actors like you say, but actually disempowering them by spreading misinformation. And that really is part of this whole discussion around generative AI and what does that mean for journalists and content makers here and production staff. You may be rolling out all these different technologies at Channel 4, but even the big tech companies themselves are taking huge risks and even saying, we don't actually think it does work or it can't actually be trusted. We'll put it out into the wide world. So, I think we should probably discuss for a little bit about what implications this does have for journalists in news production. Kamal, what do you think about that there, and what are you doing?
I think you've touched on this really important issue. As I say, for our approach at the moment, and I think, Tom, it's really exciting listening to you both, because it does help me start formulating who it is we need to be having conversations with. We need to have different experts in the room. The skill sets for all of us is completely changing, and this is why this type of panel is so important. For us at the moment, human-made has to be our starting point, because for trust and the notion that we've talked a lot in a lot of sessions here, and this is not just about journalism, but in all content creation, around the notion of skepticism about what they're being fed, and therefore the emotion it leaves them with at the end of that experience, which is what Alex started talking about in the first session we had here yesterday. This notion of, I think what Elon Musk called regretted hours. Your connection is actually at the end, you don't feel fulfilled. And I think there is a risk there. There are huge opportunities, but there's a risk there that this generated virtual reality will just put rocket boosted under regretted hours, because the experience will never quite be a human experience. And I think it is very important that there's I can see all
Herman.
We've got
technology shaking.
No, it's not a technologist in me that's shaking my head, it's the psychologist in me that does that. There is no distinction. There's 30 years of research on this. If you make a friend online, that's just a friend. If you achieve something, like you become the best Counter-Strike player in the world, that's no less an achievement than being the best player at something else. In fact, a collaborator of ours, Alex Zinchenko of Arsenal, is an incredible Counter-Strike player, and he looks at both of those skills as being valid. People who've grown up in sort of my generation and now the generation below it, and all the research shows that experiences are experiences, right? The failures and successes, these things can't be faked. Just because something is digital, it doesn't make it any less real. Right now, you're not really looking at the real world. You're looking at a representation of processed data from eyes through a machine. The second issue here that I just really want to, jump in with is you said something a little while ago which is just wrong, in my opinion. And I respect a lot of the rest of what you've said, but this is a mistake I myself made in the beginning as well. This information is not copying artists' work. Let's be very clear here. If you look at the data that goes into, say, a Stable Diffusion or an OpenAI, there's less information there than is contained, in a mathematical sense, in the corpus of work of the artists whose work it has absorbed. It is simply factually incorrect to say that generating an image is copying the work of someone else, unless you specifically instruct a model to try to do so. That's just wrong.
But it's been trained on that information, isn't it? It's been trained on, and it tries to recreate a likeness of that. And there are steps that are being made.
But it's impossible. He's right. It's impossible to disaggregate. If you say, create me a top 10 hit from a female artist that sounds a bit like this, Taylor Swift can't go, that's me, because the data is so disaggregated from her actual IP, which actually she doesn't own anymore. But you see my point. I think what I'm loving here is the disagreement, because I think that it shows how unresolved all these issues are. And Kamal said it exactly right. The only way we can find a path through this is by listening, educating, and talking about it, and understanding who in the room has this knowledge, because it's not me, it's probably these guys, but all we can do is lean into it and take the next best steps. Otherwise, there's a danger we all get very pessimistic about it and concerned and worried. When we talked in the green room, it doesn't feel like that. It felt really lots of opportunity here. The other point I want to come back to, I made it before, is how important brands are going to be in this new world, because that is the thing that's going to allow to steer through the misinformation and the difficulty, and the sense that says, I can trust this because it's on this platform and it's on this brand. And perhaps we'll go back to destinations again off these bigger, wide conglomerations of things, which is going to be a really interesting shift from Web 2.0 to whatever comes next.
Can I just come back on this copying issue?
Oh.
So it's about using a corpus of work to create something based on that corpus. And the people who have made the original corpus have not agreed for their material to be used. Let's not call copying then, to be used in the way that some generative AI models are using. So the objection may be, you were there and you've said that my ignorance means maybe I'm not there yet. But the fact is that on the side of the fence that is the human created side, there is a sense that their work is being used to the advantage of others without them gaining from it.
But let's not forget the fact, which is between your ears is a machine, which does exactly the same thing. You go to the Louvre, you look at all the paintings. It's not as though artists and writers are magicking from first principles new ideas that they never got from anywhere else. You know, what's the difference?
For me, this thing about copying is kind of a fair use analogy. People were able to train those large models on huge corpuses, 5 billion images, that are designed for research purposes, right? And so if you're building the model and you are doing things which are maybe not commercial or really significantly transformative, right? Then in law, we say that those types of things are kind of okay. There's a permissible set of things. I don't believe that it's okay to take someone's corpus of copyright work, train it in a model, and then generate things which are really, really similar for commercial gain. I think that that's bad, fundamentally. And the analogy is with our faces. If somebody took my face and my voice and created a whole bunch of me doing something, it just, for their commercial gain, it wouldn't feel right. Like, it feels weird to everybody. So I'm definitely on this side. For research, et cetera, that's great. But I also am on this side that I don't believe that it's copying. There's something happening technically that's beyond.
And it's not illegal at the moment, is it?
I think it's clear that we've all got loads of different varied views here and strong opinions on this. And it is a very interesting discussion to be had, and we're drastically running out of time here. But I just want to say that this, it all comes down to regulation, and it's not something that we've really focused on enough here, is it?
Where's Verity?
Yeah, exactly. But so this morning, The Guardian published an article which was about Professor Max Tegmark, who was the scientist behind the open letter to pause development on AI, warning that the competition right now is too intense for tech executives to pause development, to consider the AI risks. Is he right? Fundamentally, can regulation keep up with the rate of innovation here? And as a technology journalist for many years, it's always been a bit of a cat and mouse game from where I can see. So,
or hare and tortoise, actually.
Oh, yeah.
No, as in, well, look, the cat's killed all the mice. If you go on huggingface.com right now, you can see a bunch of open source models that are already unstoppable, can be run on run via torrent or run on your own machine. There's a guy called The Bloke. That's his name. Interestingly enough, and he's sort of a hero, a folk hero in AI. He's made it so you can run models locally. Stable Diffusion, great company, Stability AI in the UK, great UK company, has done this too. We could talk about regulation, but we should also talk about the practical reality. I mean, we can't pass laws to ban the sun, however much we'd like to. And unfortunately, this technology amounts to multiplication. At the heart of it, it's just numbers being multiplied en masse. That's why NVIDIA's chips are now so important. So we can't ban it. We physically can't. What we should legislate for are outcomes. Like, for example, me trying to copy your face, we can stop that. But trying to worry about the method, the machine, the device, or the thing, or regulating that, it's just impossible now.
I totally agree. The problem that we have is the technology is moving so fast. It takes 10, 15 years, 20 years to conceptualize and move a regulatory, legislative institution into place. I don't believe that tech companies will self-regulate. There is a layer, 3 months ago.
Some companies are self-regulating.
Well,
whatever that means, self-regulating.
Good for their PR. 3 months ago, I registered copyright in the AI version of myself, and that's trying to get the remedy of 24-hour takedowns for registered infringement of registered copyright under the US law. That's the teeth of the internet. That's how you get something taken down. And I'm waiting on the Copyright Office in the US to come back and say whether I can register my copyright in an AI version of myself that looks like myself. So that's an existing legal paradigm that we can co-opt to try to enable individuals to have rights and remedies to address some of the outcomes of the technology. But the technology, the open source community, it is not going anywhere. There's no idea of stopping or halting development. Development is not happening in big companies. It is happening everywhere all at once.
Thanks so much, Tom. And we're actually running drastically out of time. I just want to finish by asking a very yes or no style question, which is this all just a fad?
No.
Last year we were here talking about the metaverse. This year it's generative AI. Will we be here next year talking about generative AI?
Yes.
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 And the metaverse, yes.
Thanks so much for our guest. That's all we've got time for. Cheers.